the sound. I gotta go up here. Yep. So, we're continuing in my Faith in Business series, and I'd like to start today with starting at the sort of the beginning. My dad was kind of an entrepreneurial sort, and I was born into his family. By the time I was born, he had his own airplane, he had his own business, and he built his own house, which we lived in for quite a while. And we lived in a mobile home, and I visited every state east of the Mississippi before I turned 1 year old. So I was used to travel, and I was used to meeting new people and making new friends. Oh, my daughter just called right when I was going to do this. So anyway, I grew up, quite the sort. And so the question I ask today is, does God order your life? In my thumbnail, I put, in all your ways, acknowledge him and he will direct your paths, which was penned by Solomon, probably later in his life. And so we were traveling, and actually we were on our way to Mexico, and I got chickenpox and then came down with encephalitis in Oklahoma City. I was about 3 years old, and I remember trying to crawl from one room to the other, and I couldn't. I fell over, and I remember them pricking me all the time, probably injecting antibiotics, because half the people who get encephalitis die. I didn't die, but they told my parents I probably wouldn't be able to ride a bike. I remember pitching my cookies on a merry-go-round when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I also almost died of scarlet fever within the next year, and I almost drowned when I was 5, and I had other near-death experiences, but those were pretty serious. So looking back, it almost seems like maybe I had God's hand on my life. And my parents were very devoted. We always went to church and always prayed for meals and prayed for whatever else. But that encephalitis was an interesting episode because, oops, my computer is beeping at me. This is it's frustrating, because I was talking to a client about it, and most of the time, I have to explain it's an infection of the brain lining, and but I was talking to a client about it, and he said, they put me in charge of product selection, and he said, I'm an accountant. I don't know anything about product selection. And it happened to be at a jewelry company of all places. He said, I don't know anything about jewelry fashion or what'll sell or any of that. And he said, now my son, he can do both that creative stuff and also run the numbers. He's sort of in accounting, but can do both. He says, but I can't do that. And I said to him, what brain injury did he have as a child? And he said, that's a funny thing. He said, why would you say that? And he said that he had encephalitis. And I said, because I had encephalitis. And I was telling a friend, I was asking a PhD friend of mine who was not only a stats professor, but he was also outdoorsy and kayaking and everything. And we were talking about this stuff, and he said, and I said, I relate to you, Matthew. I really do. And you're the first PhD statistician I've been able to relate to. And he said to me, what brain injury did you have as a child? I said, wait, back up. And he told me when he was about 3.5, his father tied his left hand behind his back and forced him to become right-handed. And he said, if you crack my head open, I think that my brain rewired the hemispheric connections to give me more left and right connections. And I told him about the encephalitis, and he said, did you ever think that you perceive the world differently than most people? I said, I know. I don't see things that, my wife says, how can someone so smart be so stupid? But God bless her. And, she means it in a nice way, but I just don't see I don't see how people are relating to me, and it's probably cost me clients. But I can walk into a company and oftentimes just spot things that they've completely missed. And in the modeling, I was able to beat something like we had 11 major tests with Musician's Friend, against 8 modeling companies, and against Matthew's model, interestingly. And we beat them all. And how was that possible? Well, it's because, in fact, UCLA accused us of cheating. And I try to teach other people how I look at the numbers in a model, and I was never able to do it. And I think it's because my brain is just wired differently. So is that God's hand? Was that God's hand giving me the chicken pox? Well, I'm not going to go that far. But somehow that was used in my life. And I believe that God works all things together to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And we'll leave it there for today. And if you have any comments or experiences through life of how God used something that looked like an unfortunate circumstance, I'd love to hear from you. So have a great day. Like and share. Your friends will know you're smart. Bye-bye.